Picture a building, nothing special from the outside, 5 stories of brick the colour of old blood, wedged between 2 other buildings exactly like it, on a street exactly like the one behind it and the one ahead. 25 feet wide, maybe 100 feet deep, a slot, a box, a crate you put people in instead of goods. Now fill it with 342 people. Add a staircase that hasn't been properly lit since the gaslight fitting on the 3rd floor was stolen for scrap metal in 1871. Add 17 families sharing 2 outdoor privies in the courtyard, a courtyard the size of a dining room table. Add an air shaft in the middle of the building, about 3 feet wide, designed by an architect who genuinely believed it would bring fresh air to the interior rooms. What it actually brings is the sound of every cough, every argument, every crying baby, every death rattle from every floor, amplified and funneled directly into your window. Add soot. Not a dusting of soot. Not the kind of soot you wipe off a windowsill. Add soot as a constant, as a weather system, as a fact of life, the way rain is a fact of life in England or sand is a fact of life in Egypt. The coal smoke from 1,000 stoves in a 10-block radius, plus the factories, plus the tanneries near the water, plus the slaughterhouses on First Avenue where they kill cattle all day, and the blood runs in the gutters. That's a tenement on Bayard Street, Lower East Side, New York City, 1873. A place where you could watch a man die of consumption on the 3rd floor in the morning and step over his body on your way out because there's nowhere else to go. A place where children sleep 6 to a bed and consider it luxury because at least there's a bed. A place where the average life expectancy in certain blocks runs about 23 years. Where the disease they call the lung fever takes 1 in every 4 people who live here, and where it spreads through the air shaft in the middle of the building like a secret nobody can keep. That's where you live. That's where you grew up. We're going back there tonight. Not as reformers, not as journalists writing exposés for Harper's Weekly, not as the charity ladies who come twice a year with bread and condescension in equal measure. We're living it. You, one of the 342, the small one with the cough that isn't tuberculosis yet, the one who knows which floorboard on the 2nd floor landing creaks, and which one will hold your weight, and which one cracked through last March and dropped old Mrs. Horan's foot clean through to the ceiling below. I make these history stories. Some of you sleep to them. Some of you are just the kind of person who finds a certain comfort in knowing that whatever bad day you had today, at least you didn't spend it picking rags in a New York City alley in 1873 while trying not to breathe too deeply, because breathing too deeply is how you catch what killed your mother. Either way, get comfortable. I mean it this time, get genuinely comfortable. Because we're going somewhere cold. Here we go. The first thing you hear, before you even remember who you are, is the cough. Not your cough. You know your own cough. This one is from the other side of the thin plank wall that separates your corner of the room from the Kowalski family's corner. 6 of them in a space barely big enough for 2. You've never seen inside their corner. You know their sounds the way you know the sounds of your own body. The cough is wet. That's the thing about consumption coughs. There are coughs and there are coughs. The dry ones that come from the coal dust, those are just noise, background noise, the city's rhythm. But the wet ones have weight. They have texture. You've learned to know the difference in the dark in the same way you've learned to know which footsteps on the stairs belong to the landlord's collector and which belong to the drunk from the 4th floor. The wet ones mean something is happening to a lung that shouldn't be happening. It's Stefan, 18 years old, the oldest of the Kowalski children. You hear him suck in a breath, Try to hold it. Fail. The cough comes again, and this time there's a sound underneath it, a thickness, a gurgling that you don't let yourself name. You open your eyes to darkness, your eyes adjust. The room takes shape. One window facing the air shaft, and through it a rectangle of slightly less dark. The ceiling, maybe 8 feet above you, water-stained, in the shape of something that looks like it might be a map of a country you've never heard of. The floor beneath your pallet, the pallet itself, 2 blankets, both thin, both grey. You're on the floor because there's no bed. There was a bed once when you first came here 4 years ago, at age 8, when Mrs. Vasari took you in. She was Hungarian and Catholic and had more kindness than she had room, which is saying something because she had almost no room at all. She's gone now. Consumption. Last winter. 1 month she was complaining about her knees. The next month she had the fever. The month after that the man from the city came with a cart. Now it's just you in what used to be her room, which is also a kitchen and a laundry and a storage space and every other thing a room can be when it's the only room you have. The air in the room is cold, not winter cold. This is October 1873, and winter hasn't arrived yet. But the building holds its chill the way old stone holds old pain. The cold comes up through the floorboards where you're lying. It comes in through the window frame where the putty cracked years ago and was never replaced. It comes in around the door. You can see your breath. You've been able to see your breath since September. Stefan coughs again. You pull the thinner of your 2 blankets tighter and close your eyes and try to go back to sleep. Because sleep is free and you've got maybe 2 more hours before you have to be up. And 2 hours of sleep is 2 hours of not being hungry and not being cold and not thinking about the fact that you owe Mr. Maloney on the 2nd floor 40 cents in back rent, and you've got 11 cents to your name and the bundle of papers you're planning to sell this morning, and if you don't sell enough, you stop that thought. You've learned to stop that thought. It's a hole you can fall into, the thinking ahead hole, and once you're in it you might as well not sleep at all. So you listen instead. The building breathes at night, not pleasantly, not like something alive and healthy, more like something alive and not entirely sure it wants to stay that way. There are the sounds of the structure itself, the groans of wood swelling and contracting, the complaint of iron nails in old beams. There are the sounds of people, 342 people, and almost none of them sleeping the way sleep is supposed to work. Thin sleep, fractured sleep, sleep interrupted by the cough, by the baby 3 rooms over, by the man on the floor above who sometimes screams in Polish and sometimes in a language you don't recognize. There are the sounds from outside. The city doesn't stop. The city has never stopped. In the time you've been alive, and as far as you know it was here before you, and it will be hereafter, grinding away at something that never gets smaller. The ash cart comes at 3 in the morning on this street. You know this because you've listened to it for 4 years. The iron wheels on the cobblestones. The man who drives it doesn't say anything, never says anything. Just the creak of the cart, the clang of the barrel, and then quiet again. Until the next street. You close your eyes. You tell yourself to sleep. You sleep. Your name is Thomas Clearary. You're 12 years old. Both of your parents are dead. Your father died first, in 1867, of something the doctor called typhoid fever. Though the doctor in this neighbourhood charges 50 cents for a visit and your family didn't have 50 cents. So it wasn't actually a doctor who said typhoid fever. It was Mrs. Brennan from the building next door who used to be a nurse in Ireland before everything went wrong. and she said it looked like typhoid, and in this neighbourhood Mrs. Brennan's word counts for more than most doctors anyway. Your father's name was Patrick Clearary. He was 29 years old. He came from County Clare in 1861, the year the war started, and he worked on the docks unloading cargo. He was a large man with red hands and a way of laughing that you can still hear if you try hard enough, though the memory is getting softer at the edges, the way old cloth wears through. Your mother was Bridget Cleary, née Murphy, 26 when she died. Consumption. 18 months after your father. You were 6 years old. She died in the bed that you would eventually lose, in the room you're sleeping in now. This is all important to you because people keep telling you it shouldn't be. People keep saying that you should look forward, not back. That dwelling on the dead does no good, that you've got to be practical. The charity ladies say it. The reverend at the church says it. The man at the newsboys' lodging house on Fulton Street, Mr. O'Brien, he says it in a nicer way, but he still says it. What nobody says is, how exactly do you stop thinking about something that is still happening around you every day? The consumption is still here. Your mother died of it, and Mrs. Vasari died of it, and now Stefan Kowalski is on the other side of the wall making that wet sound. It's not the past, it's the present tense. But you don't say that. You're 12, and you know better than to argue with adults. You learn that early in this city. The bells from St. James on James Street start before the sky has properly decided to be morning. 5:45, maybe 6. You move, not quickly. Quickly means pain, stiffness, the cold hitting you all at once. You've learned to move the way the river moves in the early morning, slow and deliberate until the blood starts going, and then you can manage more. You sit up first. The pallet beneath you is a thin mattress stuffed with straw and rags, and it rustles when you move in a way that sounds animal, like something alive underneath you. The straw has compressed down to almost nothing in the centre, and the edges of the pallet curl up slightly, making a sort of shallow bowl that holds some of the heat from your body. When you stand up, the cold air hits the space where you were lying, and the warmth vanishes in seconds. Your feet find the floor. The floorboards are bare wood, old wood, and in the mornings they feel like standing on ice with an extra layer of misery underneath. You have one pair of shoes. They're not your shoes originally. They were from a boy named Dennis Fogarty, who outgrew them and sold them at the ragman's for 3 cents, and you bought them for 5 cents because the ragman had polished them up and figured he could make a profit. They're too big. You've wrapped your feet in strips of cloth cut from a flannel shirt that disintegrated last spring. The cloth strips go on first, then the shoes. In summer, the shoes give you blisters because of the extra cloth. In winter, the extra cloth is the reason your toes still work. You don't think about this. It's just the morning ritual. Feet, cloth, shoes. Then you stand up and hit your head on the shelf, same corner, every morning for 2 years. You say the same thing every morning, a word Mrs. Vasari would not have approved of. The shelf holds what you own, not much. A spare shirt, grey and thin, a tin cup, a comb with 4 teeth remaining, a small piece of wax tallow candle, barely 2 inches, save for nights when you need to read. A folded piece of paper, very old, very soft from being folded and unfolded so many times, which is a letter your father wrote to his brother in Ireland in 1866, which you've read so many times you can recite it without looking, though you do look sometimes anyway. You light the candle. The room jumps into being around you. 8 feet by 10 feet, a window, the pallet, the shelf, a small iron stove with a pipe that goes through the wall, which Mrs. Vasari bought, and which is yours now by squatter's right. You have coal for 2, maybe 3 days. That's the calculation you do every morning, unconsciously, the way other children might count their toys. How many days of warmth? How many days of not freezing? The stove is cold now. You open the small iron door and look at the coals from last night, grey and dead, and you add a handful of fresh coal from the bucket by the door, and you tear a strip from the paper wrapped round yesterday's breakfast, and you hold the candle to it and wait for the fire to catch. The fire does not catch for a while. It debates it. It considers its options. Then finally, reluctantly, a blue flame finds the paper and the coal, and the stove begins its slow morning warm-up. You hold your hands near the stove even though it's barely warm yet, even though the metal is still cold enough to hurt if you touch it directly. You hold them near it because the gesture helps, because the idea of warmth is almost as good as warmth itself when you're this cold and this tired. Above the stove there's a window. You can see the air shaft in the grey pre-dawn light. 3 feet of space between this building and the next, stretching up 5 stories to a thin rectangle of sky. A pigeon is sitting on the windowsill of the building opposite, which is close enough that on summer nights you can hear the people in that building talking if they're talking loudly. The pigeon looks at you. You look at the pigeon. Neither of you has much good news to report. Breakfast. This word is doing a lot of work this morning. You have half a loaf of bread from yesterday. Bread here is not what you might imagine when you hear the word bread. It's dense, heavy, the kind of bread that exists purely to provide calories in the smallest possible space for the least possible money. It was a penny for a whole loaf at the bakery on Mulberry Street, which is run by a man named Ferraro, who starts baking at 3 in the morning and sells his day-old bread for a half-cent if you come in the evening, which is how you got this loaf. You cut a piece with a pocket knife. The bread is stale enough that the knife makes a cracking sound as it goes through. You eat the piece standing up next to the stove, watching it slowly warm. The bread has no flavour to speak of. You stopped noticing flavour a long time ago. Flavour is a luxury item. This is fuel. You eat the whole piece before you remember that you should save some for later. Then you cut another piece because you're still hungry, and you put that in your coat pocket for later. You have a coat. Wool, or something that was wool once. Charcoal grey, missing 2 buttons. It comes down to your knees, which means it was made for someone taller, or possibly for someone of the same height but with the expectation of growth. The sleeves are too long. You've rolled them up twice, creating thick cuffs at your wrists that actually help with the cold. The coat is your most important possession, more important than the shoes, more important than the knife, more important than the letter on the shelf. In winter in this city, a coat is the difference between sick and not sick, and sick in this neighbourhood carries a very specific set of possible outcomes that you've seen play out enough times to understand clearly. You button the coat, 3 remaining buttons. You tie a piece of cord through the 4th buttonhole and around the coat to compensate for the missing button. You're ready. From the wall, Stefan Kowalski coughs again. It's softer now. Weaker. That's not better. Weaker means tiring out. You stand there with your coat buttoned and your bread in your pocket, and you listen to the sound of a young man slowly losing a war against something living in his lungs. And you think about his mother, Mrs. Kowalska, a stout woman with enormous hands who sometimes gives you cabbage soup when you've done errands for her. Who will be on the other side of that wall in 6 months or a year, listening to silence, You pick up your things and go the hallway. People talk about darkness, but they usually don't mean this. This is the hallway of a 5-story tenement building at 6 in the morning, and it is so dark that you navigate it entirely by touch and memory. Left hand on the wall, 12 steps to the staircase banister on your right. Avoid the 7th step from the bottom, which is cracked through. Also the 4th step from the top of the 2nd floor landing, which rocks under your weight. The smell in the hallway is its own thing. It starts with humans, hundreds of them. All the ordinary smells of human bodies in small spaces. Then coal smoke, layered on top of that, because every stove in every apartment vents through a pipe that is theoretically airtight, but is in practice nothing of the sort. The smell of last night's cabbage from the Kowalskis, something chemical from the Rosenblatt family on the 2nd floor. Mr. Rosenblatt rolls cigars at home, bringing work from the factory on Hester Street, and the tobacco smell has embedded itself into the walls of the 2nd floor hallway the way wood absorbs water. And underneath it all, underneath the coal and the cabbage and the tobacco, the thing you don't name, it's sickness. Not any specific sickness, but the smell of a building where many people are sick, often chronically. The sweetish, sourish smell of fever, of bodies working too hard against invaders they're losing to. You've lived with it long enough that you stop noticing it for stretches, and then something changes, someone gets worse, and it comes to the front again. You step over someone asleep on the 3rd floor landing. You don't know who it is. They're a man, from the bulk of them, wrapped in a coat with no visible face. There are nights when people who can't afford a room inside sleep in the hallways, which the landlord's man strictly prohibits, and which happens anyway because the alternative is the street and November is coming. Nobody says anything to you as you pass. Nobody looks up. You push open the building's front door, and then Bayard Street. The first thing is the cold, actual cold moving air, which after the static chill of the building feels almost violent. The October wind comes down Bayard Street from the east, from the river, and it has opinions about things. The second thing is the light, or the coming of it. 6 in the morning, October, and the sky above the canyon of buildings is a dark grey blue, barely distinguishable from night, but changing. You can see it changing if you look straight up, craning your neck back, past the clotheslines strung between buildings, past the fire escapes that were added 2 years ago by city ordnance and which are already rusting, past the walls of brick going 5 stories up on both sides. The third thing, the street. You need a moment every morning to adjust to it, even after 4 years. The street starts at 6 in the morning and doesn't stop, and stepping out into it from the building is like stepping into a river. You have to find your footing before the current takes you. Bayard Street in 1873 is a street in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which means it is one of the most densely populated streets in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in one of the most densely populated cities in the Western Hemisphere. There are approximately 300,000 people living in the square mile, bounded by Canal Street to the north, the Bowery to the west, the East River to the east, and Chatham Square to the south. 300,000 people in 1 square mile. Imagine a square mile of wherever you live right now. Count the people in it. Now multiply by whatever number gets you to 300,000. That's this street. That's every street. The immediate vicinity of the building's front door gives you a woman washing something in a bucket of grey water. An old man sitting on the front stoop of the building next door, wrapped in a blanket despite the cold. Just sitting there, watching the street go by with eyes that have clearly seen enough of it but aren't done yet. Two small children, maybe 4 and 5 years old, playing a game in the gutter that involves a stick and a piece of tin, and the gutter itself. The gutter. You've lived here 4 years and the gutter still requires a comment because people who haven't been here won't understand the story without understanding the gutter. The gutter of Bayard Street in 1873 is not a drain. It's more of a repository. The city of New York has approximately 150,000 horses working in it at any given moment. These horses produce approximately 4.5 million pounds of manure per day. That manure has to go somewhere. It goes to the street, to the gutters, to the piles that accumulate at the corners and in the low spots and in the spaces between buildings. In winter the piles freeze and become solid enough to climb. In summer they liquefy and the smell reaches the height of an art form. Mixed in with the horse manure, ashes from 10,000 stoves, rotting food, organic material of every description, the occasional dead animal, the occasional dead person, though the city does usually collect those eventually. You step around the children in the gutter and head west toward the Bowery. Your lungs fill with the October morning air of the Lower East Side, which is cold, coal smoke, horse, rot, the river in the distance, and something else, something metallic and sweet that you've decided comes from the sugar refinery somewhere uptown, though you've never traced it to its source and you might be wrong. But that slight sweetness on the back of the throat, every cold morning, it's been there so long it's almost comforting, almost home. You're going to the distribution point on Park Row. This is your life. Newsboy, paper carrier, whatever name you use, the mechanics are the same. You buy papers wholesale from the distribution office of whichever paper you're selling that day, the Tribune, the Sun, the Herald, the World, and then you sell them on the street for the cover price, and the difference is your money. The difference between wholesale and retail on a New York newspaper in 1873 is roughly 1 cent per paper. You need to sell approximately 30 papers to make enough to eat that day. A good day gets you 50 papers. A good day plus an evening edition gets you into real money, which means 60, 70 cents, which means you can pay Maloney something on what you owe and still eat. The formula is simple, the execution is not. To get to Park Row from Bayard Street, you walk northwest, past the 5 Points intersection, past what's left of the neighbourhood that used to be the most notorious slum in the United States, and is now just a regular slum, which somehow makes it more depressing rather than less. Down through the tangle of streets that press together like the pages of a wet book. The streets are already loud. The vendors start before dawn. They were here when you woke up, probably, selling things to the people who got up earlier than you. Peddlers with hand carts selling bread and coffee and apples. The coffee man is on the corner of Mulberry, and you smell him before you see him. The cart with its small boiler giving off steam in the cold air, and the smell of the coffee cuts through everything else for a moment. Just a moment. Clean and hot and impossible. Coffee is 2 cents a cup. You can't afford coffee this morning. You put your head down and you walk past the coffee cart without stopping, because stopping makes it worse. You've learned this. Looking at things you can't have is a kind of spending, a different currency but still spent. The 5 Points intersection comes up ahead of you, and you cross it without ceremony. People talk about 5 Points like it's something special. It used to be, in the old stories, the worst intersection in the world, where the gangs ran everything and bodies turned up in the morning, and respectable people had been warned away since the 1840s. The reformers came through in the late 1860s and tore down the worst of the old buildings and put up new ones, a church and a mission house and a school, all very clean and purposeful, like putting a fresh coat of paint on a ship that's taking on water. It's still one of the worst intersections in the city. There's a man on the ground at the corner of Mulberry and Worth, either asleep or dead, and two boys not much older than you are going through his coat pockets with the quick, practiced efficiency of people who do this every morning. They don't look up when you pass. You don't slow down. Keep moving. That's the rule. The city is a river, and the people who stop moving are the ones who drown. Park Row, when you reach it, is already alive. The newspaper district, the offices of the Tribune and the Sun and the Herald, all clustered within blocks of City Hall Park. Their buildings the tallest in this part of the city. Their printing presses running since midnight to have papers ready for the morning rush. There are perhaps 40 other newsboys at the Park Row distribution point by the time you arrive, all ages 6 to 17, all sexes, though the girls mostly work the smaller papers and the Brooklyn editions and tend to stay in clusters for safety. All nationalities, Irish like you, or Irish like you in the sense that your parents were Irish, and you yourself were born here, and barely remember Ireland except as a smell in your father's coat and a word in your mother's prayers. Italian boys, German boys, Polish boys, black boys who cluster near the south end of the line and get served last, always last, even though they got here first. A few Chinese boys who sell along Mott Street and come here for papers because the distribution is cheapest. You know most of them by name or by face. You know Mickey Doyle, 15, who runs the corner in front of the post office and has been running it since he was 10 and will let you die before he lets you sell within half a block of it. You know a boy everyone calls Sparrow for a reason no one can fully explain, but which seems to involve something that happened on a ferry. You know the Vargas brothers, Hector and Tiny, who are 11 and 9 and share a sleeping spot under the stairs of a building on Nassau Street, and have been alone in this city longer than you have. And you know Jimmy McCaffrey. Jimmy is 14. He's been doing this for 6 years. He knows things about selling newspapers that aren't written down anywhere, the law of this particular trade, the art of it, and he imparted much of what he knows to you over your first year, partly because he is essentially a decent person under all the grime, and partly because you ran an errand for him on your second day here. That involved a considerable amount of personal risk, and he decided he owed you something for it. Jimmy's already at the window when you arrive, buying his papers for the morning. He gives you a nod. Herald's run in a story about the financial crisis, he says, without looking at you, folding his papers under his arm with the quick dexterity of someone who's done it 10,000 times. Big type. People like big type. The financial crisis. You've heard of this. September 1873. The investment firm J. Cook and Company collapsed, which started a panic, which spread through the banks, which is now being called the Panic of 1873, and which is, according to everyone who discusses it with more authority than you can claim, the worst financial crisis the United States has seen since before the war. Banks failing, businesses closing, men who'd been comfortable a year ago now standing on street corners looking confused and frightened, which is a new sight to you. The frightened and confused people on this street normally know exactly why they're frightened and confused. How many you selling? You ask Jimmy. 50 Tribune, 20 Herald. Weather looks clear. I'll try for another 30 this afternoon. He glances at you. You still down on Maloney's rent? Working on it. You could sell the corner of Fulton if you get there by 7. O'Brien's corner. O'Brien's working the ferry today, he told me. A pause. I'm not saying steal his corner. I'm saying he's not there this morning. You absorb this information. Fulton Street near the ferry terminal is better than where you normally work because the people coming off the ferries from Brooklyn have money and they want their news and they don't stop to haggle. The corner is territory, same as everything in this city, and using someone's territory without permission is the kind of thing that can get complicated. But Jimmy's information about O'Brien is reliable, and a good morning on Fulton could change the rent situation by evening. Yeah, you say. All right. You buy your papers. 20 Herald, 20 Tribune, 40 papers. That's your morning investment. 40 cents. Money you technically don't have, but the distribution man, Murphy, lets you run a tab because you've never stiffed him, and he's known your face for 3 years. The tab has limits. You know the limits. You're inside them barely. You fold the papers under your arm. 40 newspapers in a stack under a 12-year-old's arm is heavier than it sounds. You can feel the weight of it in your shoulder before you've gone half a block. You turn north toward Fulton Street. Here is what selling newspapers on a New York City corner looks like from the inside in October 1873, which is the first month of a financial panic that will last 6 years. You plant yourself at the corner of Fulton and Broadway, which is technically O'Brien's corner, and you begin. The pitch is a sentence, maybe 2. You don't have time for more because nobody has time for more. The city moves at one speed which is too fast, and the newsboy who stops traffic gets stepped on, and the newsboy who hesitates loses the customer to the boy on the next corner. Herald Tribune, financial crisis, bank failures, get your news. Your voice is not loud enough, it never is the first few minutes. You have to warm it up the way you warm up a cold stove. You start thin and reedy and gradually it finds its body. Financial crisis, J. Cook hearings today. You've discovered that the financial panic sells papers. People who haven't bought a newspaper in weeks are buying them now because they need to know what's happening to their money. The problem is that the people on Fulton Street at 7 in the morning are mostly workers, dock workers and factory workers and office clerks, and none of them have much money in any bank, and they're buying papers not because they're worried about their investments, but because they want the satisfaction of reading about rich men suffering. This is understandable. You feel the same way. The first customer, a man in a blue coat, moving fast, barely slowing down, hand already out. Herald. He drops a penny, takes the paper, keeps walking. The whole transaction takes less than 3 seconds. Good start. The second customer, an older woman moving slower, who wants to know if there's anything about the gas workers' strike. You don't know. You haven't read the paper. You never read the papers. Reading takes time you don't have, and besides, reading is something you do in private, not standing on a cold corner in a coat with a missing button. You tell her you think there might be. She buys a Tribune. By 8 o'clock you've sold 12 papers. By 9 o'clock, 21. You're cold in the specific way that comes from standing still in cold air, which is a different cold than the moving cold of walking or the still cold of sleeping. This cold settles. It finds the places your coat doesn't reach, the gap at your collar, the roll of fabric at your wrists where the sleeves are turned up, and it installs itself there with a thoroughness that is almost admirable. Your feet are worse. The cloth wrapping in the shoes works well for the first hour. By the second hour it has compressed and shifted, and the left shoe, which is the larger of the two and was always the larger, has developed a cold spot near the heel where the cloth has pulled away from the leather and the cold hits your skin directly. You shift your weight from foot to foot. 11 papers left. The morning rush is tapering. The clerks and workers are at their desks now. The ferry crowd has dispersed, and the street has entered its mid-morning mode, which is slower, more deliberate. The people still on the street are either errand running or shopping, or standing around in the particular way that men without work stand around. In the fall of 1873, a new and particular kind of standing that is starting to appear on every street corner. You know the look. You saw it on men in this neighbourhood when you were small, men who'd been laid off from the docks or the factories, standing with their hands in their pockets and their eyes on the middle distance. But it was usually a few men on specific corners at specific times. Now it's everywhere. There's a man across the street from your corner who's been standing there since you arrived. He's in a suit, an actual suit, which marks him as someone who did not grow up in this neighbourhood. The suit is not new, but it was quality once. He's holding a small piece of cardboard with something written on it, but the angle is wrong, and you can't read what it says. He holds it up occasionally when men walk by. Nobody stops. You watch him between customers. He doesn't know you're watching. Nobody watches the newsboy. The newsboy is furniture, part of the street, beneath notice. After half an hour you see a man in a better coat approach him, read the sign and shake his head. The suited man says something. The man in the better coat says something back, shorter, and walks away. The suited man stands there for another minute. Then he puts the cardboard in his coat pocket and walks away slowly, head slightly down in the direction of the river. You have 9 papers left. You sell 7 more by 11 and give up on the final 2. You can sell them in the evening off the late edition buyers. Your total for the morning, 31 papers. 31 cents profit minus your tab with Murphy, plus the 2 papers you're holding for evening. 31 cents. You stand on the corner and count the coins in your palm. Pennies mostly, 1 nickel. The weight of them is satisfying in a way that has nothing to do with the amount, just the fact of them, the small hard proof that the morning happened and was not entirely wasted. Your stomach is doing something complicated. You ate the bread piece from your pocket at round 8, which helped for a while. Now it's 11, and the bread is a memory, and your stomach has stopped asking politely and moved into a sort of sullen insistence. You know a cart on John Street that does soup for 3 cents. Actual soup, not coloured hot water. Thick, with things in it. The man who runs it is named Giovanni, and he's been on that corner since before you were selling papers, and he's never given anyone credit, but he's also never watered his soup, and in this neighbourhood those 2 qualities put him somewhere between a saint and a mystery. 3 cents for soup. You walk to John Street. The soup is hot. Hot is not the right word. The soup is scalding, which is actually better, because when you wrap both hands around the tin cup and the heat transfers through the metal into your palms and your fingers, it is the most direct pleasure available in your current life. You stand with your back to a wall, out of the wind, and you hold the cup and you let your hands thaw before you even try to drink. The soup is some kind of bean, possibly 2 kinds of bean, a chunk of something that might be pork or might be something that came from a pig without being quite pork, onion, salt, something green that's been cooked to the point of dissolution. It fills your mouth with heat and salt and the particular flavour of things that have been cooked together for a long time, until they become one thing instead of several. You eat it in small sips. If you eat it too fast, you'll be hungry again by 1 o'clock. Slow burns longer. The corner outside Giovanni's cart is busy in the particular way of a street corner where people stop to eat something cheap and standing up. A man to your left is eating a roll, eating it with the efficiency of someone on a timetable. 2 women to your right are sharing something wrapped in paper, talking quickly in a language that sounds like German, and neither of them is quite looking at the other. They're watching the street while they talk. The kind of wariness that is so automatic it doesn't even look like wariness anymore. Across from you, on the wall of the building opposite, there's a posted notice. It's been there for a few weeks, you've seen it before, but you stop on it now because you have a moment and because reading is something you can do while you eat. The notice is from a company looking for workers, skilled and unskilled, factory work, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 40 cents a day for unskilled, 40 cents a day. You just made 31 cents in 5 hours of standing in the cold. But factory work is inside. Factory work is steady. Factory work is not standing on a corner hoping the people walking past choose you over the boy on the next block. The thing about factory work that the notice doesn't mention, you're 12. Most factories in New York in 1873 will hire a 12-year-old. There is no law that says they can't. The laws that might say they can't mostly don't exist yet, and the ones that do exist are enforced with the thoroughness you'd expect from a city government, in the process of recovering from having been substantially run by a corrupt political machine for the better part of a decade. So you could get factory work. The question is what the factory makes, because the making matters enormously in terms of what the factory does to your body. You've been to the match factory on the west side once, on an errand. Girls, mostly girls, working the phosphorus machines. Their jaws. You won't describe what you saw happening to their jaws, but you remember it the way you remember the sound of Stefan Kowalski's cough, as something that has been stored in a particular part of your memory, where things go when you need to keep functioning. Garment work is better. Cigar rolling is tolerable. Glass cutting pays more. Most of them will be loud and cold and have fumes of some kind, and a foreman who will find reasons to dock your pay. You finish the soup. You give the cup back to Giovanni, who has never said anything more than the price to you, but who nods every time in a way that you have decided means something good. You head back toward the distribution point for the afternoon papers. This is the city you move through every day. You know it the way you know your own body, by scar and habit, rather than by any particular study. You know which blocks to walk through quickly, and which ones have places you can slow down if you need to rest. You know where the police usually are and where they usually aren't. You know the landmarks not as buildings, but as navigation points, as turns in a route that has been walked enough times to live in your feet. But you don't know the city. The city is too large to know. That's something you're only beginning to understand, and it will take years more before you understand it fully. Manhattan Island in 1873 is about 13 miles long and 2 miles wide. A long, narrow shape pressed between 2 rivers, connected to the rest of the world by ferries and bridges that are still being built, and roads that lead north into what is still mostly farmland above 59th Street, though that's changing. The city is growing north, the way a fire grows upward, eating through neighbourhoods and replacing them with newer, taller, more expensive versions of themselves. Down here, in the lower end of the island, it's different. This is the old city, the parts that were, here before the grid plan, before the commissioners surveyed the island in 1811 and laid out the streets in their numbered rational order. Down here the streets follow the logic of deer paths and wagon ruts, of wherever seemed like a good idea 100 years ago. They angle and intersect and dead-end with an almost personal quality, as if the streets have opinions. You know maybe 20 blocks of this city with any real intimacy. 20 blocks, maybe 40 if you stretch it. Beyond that, it's strange territory. And sometimes, on days when the papers have sold and the soup is in you and you've got a penny or two extra, and no immediate catastrophe demanding your attention, you walk into strange territory, just to see. Today is one of those days, not far, not so far you can't get back by evening, but north, past the familiar streets, past the Bowery with its saloons and its theatres and its endless commerce, into the territory north of Houston Street, which to you still feels slightly foreign, slightly cleaner, slightly less like the bottom of things. Broadway, above Houston, is a different street than Broadway below it. Same cobblestones, same general principle, but the buildings are taller and newer and the people on the street are wearing better coats, and the smell, while still fundamentally a New York City street smell, has different proportions. Less rot. More coal smoke from the nicer kind of stove. More horse, because people who can afford horses have more of them. The shops. You walk past shops you will never enter. Dry goods merchants with window displays that glow in the grey October light. A milliner with hats on wooden forms, flowers and ribbons and net. The kind of thing that could be a month's eating for a family on Bayard Street. A photographer's studio with portrait samples in the window. Whole families arranged on chairs, stiff and serious and scrubbed, looking at the camera with expressions that say, "We paid for this, record it." You look at the faces in the photographs. They're not beautiful people, necessarily, or particularly unusual people. They're just people with enough money to pay for a photograph, which makes them a category of human being you interact with mainly at a distance. A woman comes out of the milliner's shop as you pass. She's carrying a hat box, and she's wearing a coat that is a genuinely remarkable thing. Deep green wool with a collar of dark fur, and she walks directly toward you on the sidewalk, and for a moment you think you might have to step aside. She steps aside. This surprises you so much that you almost stop walking. You don't stop walking. But you carry the surprise with you for half a block, the small, strange fact of it. She stepped aside. Not you. The city teaches you where you stand by the way people walk toward you. Most of the time the answer is very clearly at the bottom. You learn the geometry of sidewalk dominance early, adults over children. Men over women, usually, but rich women over everyone. Police over everyone except the particular class of businessman who funds the police. White skin over everyone else, with a set of internal hierarchies among white-skinned people that are elaborate and constantly shifting. You are 12. You're wearing a coat with a missing button. You're carrying the evidence of your morning's work in newsprint stains on your hands that the cold water this morning didn't fully remove. That woman stepped aside for you anyway. Maybe she wasn't paying attention. Maybe she had good morning. Maybe some small alignment of the universe decided to give you a moment's dignity on Broadway on an October Tuesday. You keep walking, but you remember it. By 2 p.m, you've made your way as far north as 14th Street, which is further than you intended and further than you normally go. 14th Street is where the city changes into something richer. The theatre district begins here. The stores are larger, the buildings more ornamented. Union Square is 2 blocks east, and on days when there's a rally or a gathering, you can hear it from here. The construction noise starts before you can see it. It's a different noise than the construction you're used to, which is generally someone building or repairing something small and specific. This is large-scale industrial noise, the clanging of metal and the groan of machinery and the shouts of hundreds of workers, and underneath all of it a rhythmic hammering that carries for blocks, that you've heard on and off for years without ever tracking down its source. You track it down today. You follow the noise east toward the river, and then south, and then east again, until you emerge from a side street onto a stretch of riverfront, and you see what's been making that noise. The Brooklyn Bridge, under construction, or rather, one of the towers is under construction, the Manhattan Tower, on your side of the river. They started in 1870, you've heard. 5 stories of granite visible above the water, rising at the rate of a few feet per year, a slow, enormous project that will take years more to complete. You've seen it before, from a distance, from the ferry. From the river, the 2 towers look like the gates of something, the beginning of a structure so enormous that it's hard to hold in the mind all at once. From here, up close, it's different. Up close, you can see the people. Hundreds of workers swarming over the tower base and the cable works and the scaffolding that surrounds the whole project. Men with ropes and men with hammers, and men directing men with ropes and hammers. Irish, mostly. You can hear the accents from where you're standing, plus Italian and German and a dozen other things. The noise from up close is beyond what language does with the word loud. It's something that happens to your body, something that vibrates in your chest and your teeth. The hammering of metal on stone, the grind of a crane, the human shout multiplied by hundreds, bouncing off the water and the surrounding buildings and coming back changed. You stand at the edge of the working area, behind a fence put up to keep onlookers back, and you watch men move stone. One of the workers, on a short break, notices you watching. He's a big man with a red face and grey whiskers, and hands so large they look like they belong to a different species. "Looking for work?" he says, not unkindly, more curious than anything. "No, sir, just looking." "Good." He wipes his face with a rag. "You don't want this work. Half these men will be in the Sandhog crews by spring." "Sandhog?" He points at the base of the tower down toward the waterline. They dig the foundation down in compressed air, inside a caisson, iron box under the river. Air pressure keeps the water out. Men work down there 10, 12 hours a day. He looks at you steadily. The ones who come up too fast, sometimes they get what they call the bends. Pain like you wouldn't believe. Paralysis. Some of them die. Why do they keep working? He looks at you like this is either the most intelligent or the most naive question he's heard today. "Pays good," he says. He puts the rag back in his pocket and stands up. $2 a day in the caisson, $2 a day is worth some risk. He walks back toward the work site. You look at the tower. The granite is a dark grey, wet from the river spray, and the scale of it is still not entirely real even from here. The bridge, when it's finished, will be the longest suspension bridge in the world. You've heard this. You'll hear it for years. The longest suspension bridge in the world, connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn across the East River, which is exactly the kind of thing that seems impossible until you're standing in front of its tower and watching men inch it into existence by hand. the longest suspension bridge in the world. And it's being built by men who will die from coming up from underground too quickly. By men from your neighbourhood, the same neighbourhood where the consumption kills 1 in 4, by men who get $2 a day to risk it. You stand there until the cold off the river becomes too much. Then you turn and walk back the way you came. You take a different route back because the route you know well is the route that gets you home efficiently, and you've got time today, and the strange territory is still offering itself, so you walk west, away from the river, through blocks you know less well, and that's how you end up on Green Street, and that's how you hear the sound, and that's what leads to the rest of it. The sound is girls singing, not street singing, not the singing of a girl trying to sell something or a girl calling to someone. This is organised singing, rhythmic multiple voices, coming from inside a building. The building is a factory. 4 stories, wide windows, a sign above the door in English and in what you think is Italian. You stop on the sidewalk and listen. The voices come down through the upper windows, and the sound is strange in the way that unexpected beauty is always strange in this city. Like a flower in the gutter, slightly disorienting, slightly suspicious. A girl about your age emerges from the factory door on the way to somewhere. She's carrying a bundle of finished goods, something fabric, pinned, the shape of it suggesting garments, and she walks quickly with her eyes on the destination and not on you. But you're blocking the sidewalk and she has to go around, and she glances up as she does it. The glance. She has coal dust on her face. Not just on her face, in the lines around her eyes, in the creases of her nose, on her hands and wrists. The kind of embedded dirt that goes beyond the skin surface and becomes part of the surface. Her eyes are very light, grey or green, hard to tell in the October afternoon light. They're sharp with something, alertness or calculation, or just the particular look of someone who has learned to size up a situation in a second. "You lost?" she says. "No. You're not from this block. I'm from Bayard Street." She looks at you for exactly the amount of time required to assess the information. Then she nods, almost to herself, as if you've confirmed a theory. "You're selling papers?" "This morning, not now." "The singing," she says, matter of fact. "We do it so we don't fall asleep at the machines. The foreman doesn't like it, but he likes it better than us falling asleep on the machines." She adjusts the bundle under her arm and starts walking again. Then she turns back, half-turned, still moving. "There's a place on Mott Street. They're looking for someone to run deliveries in the morning, earlier than your papers. Pays 3 cents a delivery." Then she's gone, walking fast, the bundle under her arm. You stand on the sidewalk and think about that for a moment. The afternoon papers sell better than the morning ones. Jimmy was right. The financial crisis is the story, and it's getting bigger by the day. More bank failures, more businesses closing. The panic is spreading from the men in suits to the men who work for the men in suits, which means it's spreading in the direction of you. Your corner for the afternoon is back near Park Row, which is where you're comfortable and where you know the flow of the people coming out of the offices and the municipal buildings. The late afternoon crowd is different from the morning crowd, more exhausted, more willing to pause for a moment. You do better selling papers to tired people than to people in a hurry, because tired people are already stopped. Herald, Tribune, J. Cook hearings, bank closures uptown. 31 cents in the morning, 18 in the afternoon, total for the day, 49 cents. Minus your tab with Murphy. 39 cents actually in your pocket. 39 cents. You do the math the way you always do it. Rent is 8 cents a day, which is $2.40 a month, which is what you owe Maloney for the room. You're 6 days behind, which is 48 cents. You're 39 plus some portion of tomorrow's papers, and you're almost out from under it. 3 or 4 more good days. Soup tomorrow morning if you're careful tonight. The rest of the bread in your room. Maybe an apple if the man on Centre Street has the bruised ones for a penny for 2. This is the arithmetic of the margin. Every day is an arithmetic of the margin. You're back on Bayard Street by 7. The evenings come down hard over the city, which it does in October, dropping the last of the light suddenly and replacing it with the gas lamp glow, amber and uneven, that makes the streets look like they're underwater. The building is different at 7. The day workers are back, which means the stairs are busy. The hallways smell more strongly of bodies and cooking. From behind closed doors, voices, the clatter of supper preparation, a child crying, a radio that doesn't exist yet, but would, if it did, be tuned to something Irish. What you actually hear is the accordion. 3rd floor, the Ferretti family. Mr. Ferretti plays accordion after supper on Tuesdays and Thursdays and sometimes Saturdays, and the sound comes through the walls and the floor in a way that shouldn't be pleasant given its source and the circumstances, and is somehow pleasant anyway. You climb to the 5th floor, your door. You go in, close the door behind you, and stand in your room for a moment in the dark before you light the candle. In the dark the room is larger. That's not how it works architecturally, but that's how it works in experience. In the dark the walls go somewhere unspecified, and the ceiling is just the quality of the air above your head, and the room becomes whatever size the moment requires. Sometimes that's smaller and terrible. Sometimes it's something else. Tonight, after the bridge and the girl on Green Street and 49 cents in your pocket, the dark room is tolerable. More than tolerable. You light the candle, 8 by 10 feet. Cold, but not freezing. The stove still has some warmth in it. Your pallet. Your shelf. The water you'll use for washing. Grey from this morning, but it'll have to do. You sit on the pallet and you take off the shoes and the cloth wrapping, and you look at your feet in the candlelight, which is a ritual you do every evening, whether you want to or not, because the feet are information. 3 small blisters on the left foot, 2 on the right, none of them broken or infected. The toes are all intact. The heel is tender where the cold got in, but the skin is unbroken. Your feet are fine. This is enough. You sit there with your feet in the candlelight and you eat the second piece of bread, the one you saved from this morning, and you think about the bridge tower and the sound of the girls singing and the woman in the green coat who stepped aside for you on Broadway. From the other side of the wall, nothing. Stefan Kowalski is quiet. You're not sure if quiet is better than the cough or not. You sit with the uncertainty of it. There is a man named Father Hannigan at the Church of St. James who runs what he calls a night school on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the church hall, and you attend it on the Thursdays when you're not too tired, which is not often enough. Tonight is a Tuesday, so no school. But you have in your room, borrowed from the night school's tiny collection and not yet returned, a copy of a book called 2 Years Before the Mast, by Richard Henry Dana, which is the account of a man who worked as a common sailor on a merchant ship in the 1830s. You got it because Father Hannigan described it as a book about hard work and the sea, which sounded neither interesting nor improving, but you were there when he said it, and he handed you the book and you took it. You read it for the first time last week, by candlelight, in small pieces, and what surprised you was the detail. The man who wrote it, he wrote about the actual work of being a sailor, the ropes and the sails and the standing watches in the cold, the specific reality of it, and reading it felt like being somewhere real. It felt more real than many things you encounter daily, which was disorienting in a way you're still processing. You take it off the shelf, the candle is short, you have maybe an hour before it burns out and you need to be careful with it, but you open the book and you find where you left off and you read. And the thing about reading, about real reading, is that it takes you out of the room. Not in a pleasant, escapist way, not exactly. More like it expands the room. Your 8 by 10 feet, with the cold and the straw and the sounds from next door, it all stays. But next to it there's now also a ship in the Pacific Ocean in 1835, and a man hauling on a rope in the dark, and both of those things are real at the same time. You read until the candle gets very short. Then you put the book back on the shelf. You lie down and pull both blankets up. The accordion from the 3rd floor has stopped. In the wall, a sound, different from the cough. A voice, very low, very quiet. You can't make out words, just the shape of a voice, the cadence of prayer. Mrs. Kowalska, praying over her son maybe, or just praying because it's evening, and praying is what you do when the day is done and you've survived it and you're not sure about tomorrow. You lie in the dark and you listen to the shape of her prayer without understanding the words, which are Polish, and you think about your mother. Your mother's prayers were in English and Gaelic, and sometimes in a mix of both, in the particular way that grief mixes languages, and they were quieter than Mrs. Kowalska's, but they had the same shape, the same cadence, the rise and fall of a voice addressing something it can't see but believes in anyway. You're not sure you believe in anything currently. This is a question you've been leaving alone because it seems like a question that has costs that will lead somewhere you're not ready to go. At night school, Father Hannigan sometimes says things that suggest faith is a muscle, that it needs exercise, that if you haven't been working it, it will weaken. You lie in the dark and consider the state of your faith muscles. The city outside your window continues its noise, distant, muffled by glass and cold and altitude 5 floors up. In the middle of the night something wakes you. You're up before you're awake, which is a skill the city develops in you. The ability to go from sleep to standing in the same motion, the way animals do it, without the luxury of lying there and deciding whether it's worth getting up. You're standing in your room in the dark and your heart is beating very fast and something is wrong. You don't know what for 3 seconds. Then you smell it. Smoke. Not cold smoke. Not the ordinary smoke of stoves and fireplaces that is so constant it registers as air. This is different. This smoke has heat in it. This smoke has urgency. Fire. You go to the door and put your hand on it, flat palm on the wood, because you've heard that this is how you tell if there's fire on the other side, and the wood is not hot. Whatever is burning is not right outside your door. You open the door anyway, carefully, and the hallway smoke comes in like a hand, thick and specific, and below you, from the stairwell, you can see a flicker of orange. 2nd floor. The Rosenblatt apartment, where Mr. Rosenblatt rolls cigars by lamplight in the small hours when he can't sleep, has caught fire. You don't need to make a decision. Your body makes it for you. You slam your door and grab your coat off the floor where you dropped it, and your shoes and the letter off the shelf and the book, because the book belongs to Father Hannigan, and you'll have to face him either way, and you go out your door and up, because down is where the fire is and up is toward the roof, and the roof is cold, but it is not on fire. The hallway is full of sound now. all the sound of a building waking up in panic, which is different from any other waking up, which is doors and running and voices in 6 languages, all saying the same thing in 6 different ways, which is get out. You take the stairs to the roof, because you know how to get to the roof, because you've been up there in summer when the rooms are unbearable, and you know the hatch on the top landing that opens with one hard shove. The hatch opens. Cold air hits you like a wall. You come out onto the roof of the building, onto tarred flat surface and chimneys and the evidence of other tenants who use this space. A broken chair, some pots, a washing line. And you look south toward the street and you can see the light from the 2nd floor, the orange flicker in the window, and below it the street is already filling. You're not the first person on the roof. There are 8 or 9 others up here already, some fully dressed, some not, some with children in their arms, and the particular silence that falls over a panicked people who are out of immediate danger. The silence of people counting heads. You count. Everyone you know by face from the upper floors seems to be here. The man with the blanket from the 3rd floor landing is here, his blanket still wrapped around him. Someone is not here. You look at the faces again. Stefan Kowalski is not here. Mrs. Kowalska is here, in a coat thrown over a nightgown, her grey hair down, and she's looking around at the faces on the roof with an expression that is not panic. It has gone past panic to something on the other side of it. Something almost calm. You go to her. Where is Stefan? She looks at you. She knows you. You've been in this building for 4 years. He doesn't want to go downstairs anymore, she says. Not for 2 weeks now. Too tired. You look at the hatch you came up through. The smoke from where you're standing is not thick up here. The fire is in the lower floors. The stairs, the last time you were on them, were smoky but passable. You look at the hatch. You look at Mrs. Kowalska. You go back down. The smoke on the 4th floor is worse than you expected, and better than the 2nd floor, which you don't go near. You can breathe, barely, if you stay low, and you've heard enough about fires to know, stay low, the air is better near the floor. You go to the Kowalski apartment door. You knock. Stefan. Stefan, there's a fire. You need to come out. Nothing. You try the door. It opens. Mrs. Kowalska didn't lock it behind her in the panic. The room is small. 1 room, 6 people normally, now 1 person. The smoke has gotten in through the crack under the door and under the windows, and the room smells of it. Coal smoke and something else underneath that is fire-specific. The particular smell of wood that is not supposed to be burning. Stefan is on a pallet on the far side of the room. He's awake. He's looking at you with the eyes of someone who's been awake in the dark for a long time. The kind of awake that goes past, tired, into something else. His face in the reflected light from the window is grey-white. There's a fire, you say. I heard. His voice is not much. It comes from somewhere deep and effortful. You have to come out. I can't. You look at him. He's 18. He's twice your size. He could not walk to the end of the hall under his own power 2 weeks ago, which is why he hasn't tried the stairs. I'll help you, you say. He looks at you. He's weighing something. You can see it in his face, the calculation, the effort of deciding. Then he puts his hand on the wall and starts to push himself up. It takes a long time. You help where you can, which means you get under his arm on his left side and you take as much of his weight as 12-year-old legs can take, which is not a lot. He is much heavier than you, even as thin as he's gotten, and the first moment when his full weight comes onto you, you nearly go down. You don't go down. You find the balance of it, the way to take his weight without losing yours. You move toward the door. Stefan moves with you, half carried, his feet finding the floor in small shuffling steps. The hallway. The smoke is thicker now, and Stefan coughs. A deep, wet cough that you can feel transmitted through your shoulder where his arm is draped, and for a moment he stops moving because the cough is everything. Then it ends and you move again. The stairs up. The stairs up are harder than the room because stairs require both of you to coordinate in the dark and the smoke, and you're still not tall enough for this to be graceful. It is not graceful. It is slow and effortful, and Stefan's feet find the stair edges twice and miss them once, and you catch him, mostly, and then you're on the top landing and the hatch is above you and you push it with one hand while the other arm holds Stefan and the cold air comes down, and Stefan breathes it in and coughs again but differently, more productively, and then he gets his hands on the edge of the hatch and pulls himself up with a strength you didn't know he had left. You come up after him. The roof. Mrs. Kowalska is there. She makes a sound when she sees Stefan. Not words, just a sound that is the sound of a mother who thought she had lost something getting it back. Stefan sits down heavily on the tarred roof. He puts his head back and breathes the cold air and looks up at the sky. You look down at your hands. They're shaking. You notice this with a kind of remote interest, like noticing a fact about someone else's hands. Below on the street there are voices and the sound of people running, and the bell of the fire engine, which has been summoned and is, by the sound of it, several blocks away still. "The Kowalski boy and the Clearary boy," says someone behind you, and it's the man from the second floor, the one who always smells of cabbage. He's looking at you with an expression you don't see often directed at yourself, an expression of uncomplicated approbation, of witnessing something worth witnessing. You look away from it. It makes you uncomfortable in a way you don't have a name for. The fire engine arrives with a rattle and a clamour that fills the street, and the men in their gear get to work on the second floor, and the crowd below watches with the attentive engagement of New Yorkers who are very good at watching things. You and Stefan and Mrs. Kowalska sit on the roof. The stars are out, or some of them are. The coal smoke diffuses them but doesn't entirely eliminate them, and if you know where to look, there are actual stars visible above the canyons of the city. You've learned where to look. Stefan puts his hand on your shoulder briefly. His hand is very light, like the pressure of a bird landing. Then he takes it away and goes back to breathing. The fire does not destroy the building. The Rosenblatt apartment is gutted. The family is out on the street by dawn with everything they own, which is not much. 3 apartments on the second floor have smoke and water damage. The landlord, when he appears in the morning, looks at the damage with the expression of a man performing the emotion of concern without feeling it, because what he's actually calculating is, which is worse, the cost of repairs or the cost of replacing 3 families who know this building and will stay in it even in its current state because they cannot afford not to. He decides on repairs. Modest repairs. By noon the building is being discussed on the street in the present tense, which means it's going to survive, which means you're going to be allowed back in. They let the upper floor residents back in by evening. You go back to your room, your shelf, the letter, the book, the tin cup, the comb, all here. The room smells of smoke. It will smell of smoke for weeks. You'll add that smell to the others, to the catalogue of what Bayard Street smells like in autumn. You sit down on the pallet. Your hands have stopped shaking. You're 12 years old, and you're not going to think about what you did tonight in terms of bravery or heroism, which is not the language you have available anyway. You did a thing because there was a thing to be done and you were the person present. That's what you're going to tell yourself, and it's true, and it's enough. You lie down, you close your eyes. From next door, silence. Then, after a while, the slow sound of Stefan Kowalski breathing. Not coughing, just breathing. That's enough too. The week after the fire, Mr. Maloney comes. He comes on a Thursday morning when you're still at home, which is unusual. He usually comes in the evenings when the day workers are back and he can catch everyone together. He knocks on your door with the specific 3-knock pattern that everyone in the building recognises as Maloney's knock. The pattern that means rent. You open the door. Maloney is 50 or so, a cork man, broad across the shoulders and gone soft around the middle, with a thick grey moustache and the permanently suspicious eyes of a man whose job is to not believe what people tell him about their financial situations. "Clearary," he says. "Mr. Maloney." He looks at you for a moment. Then he does something unexpected. He holds out a piece of paper. You take it. It's a receipt. A rent receipt for 4 weeks, your name on it, the amount 75 cents. "I'm not behind by 75 cents, you say. "No," Maloney says. "You're paid up through the end of November." You look at the receipt, then at Maloney. Who paid it? He looks at the ceiling briefly, the way men look at ceilings when they're composing an answer. Then he looks at you again. "Some of the tenants," he says, "from the building they collected after the fire." A pause. The Kowalski family contributed. Mrs. Ferretti, some others. He turns and walks back down the hall. You stand in your doorway holding the receipt. 342 people in this building. They live on top of each other and they share a privy, and the air shaft carries everything, every sound, every disease. They're overcrowded and underfed, and the city barely knows they exist. They took up a collection. For you. You fold the receipt and put it in your pocket, and you go out to buy your papers. By November, Stefan Kowalski is much worse. You know this from the sounds, which have changed in character, and from Mrs. Kowalska, who you see in the hall and who tells you in the direct, undecorated way of someone who has run out of euphemisms. He will not see Christmas. She says it without crying. She says it the way you say, "It will rain tomorrow," or "The bread will be cheaper on Saturday." This is what repeated loss does to a person. Not that it makes them care less, it makes them absorb more. The grief is still there, has always been there, but they've built themselves around it, the way a tree grows around a fence, and it becomes part of the structure rather than something that breaks the structure. You think about your mother when you look at Mrs. Kowalska, not in a painful way, not exactly, more like recognition. You recognize the shape of how she carries it. You help her where you can. You carry coal up to her apartment on the days when the coal man comes. You bring her an apple once, the bruised kind, 2 for a penny, because she mentioned her son used to like apples before he couldn't eat much anymore. She takes the apple with the seriousness it deserves. "You're a good boy," she tells you, coming. From her, it is neither a small thing nor a large thing. It is simply a true thing. Father Hannigan's night school on a cold Thursday in November. 7 students tonight. Smaller than usual. The weather has gotten truly cold, and the walk to the church hall is deterrent enough for some. The hall itself is heated by a single large stove in the corner, and the heat from it reaches the first 2 rows well, and the back of the room not at all. You sit in the second row. Father Hannigan is 55, a tall, spare man with white hair and the kind of face that weather has worked on for a long time. He came from Galway originally, 30 years ago, and he has the accent still. Or he deploys it still, which might be different. He is not sentimental about the Irish in this city, but he is committed to them in a way that doesn't require sentiment. Tonight he's teaching arithmetic, which he does by framing problems in the language of the street. If a newsboy buys 30 papers at a penny each and sells 25 at 2 cents each and 5 at 1 cent each, what's his profit? You know this math. You live this math. But you sit and do it with the others because the doing of it in this room, formally, with a slate and a piece of chalk, is different from the doing of it in your head in the street. It's the difference between a thing you've learned by survival and a thing you can teach. After the arithmetic, Father Hannigan does what he does sometimes, which is talk about something else entirely. He looks around the room at the 7 of you and he says, "Who here wants something different?" Nobody says anything. Not. Who wants something better? That's too easy. Everyone wants something better. I'm asking about different path, different kind of life than what's around you. Silence. Then a girl at the back whose name is Agnes and who works in the garment factory on Green Street, or near Green Street. You're not sure if she's the girl from last month, but it's possible. Says, "Different takes money." Often, Father Hannigan says. Not always. He looks around again. There are programs, he says. For children from this district, the Children's Aid Society sends orphans and half-orphans west. Kansas, Nebraska, farm families, some of them good, some of them not. A lottery. He waits. There are apprenticeships. The printers' unions are closed, but the carpenters aren't entirely. There are people in this city who will give a sharp boy a chance if someone introduces them correctly. He's looking at you when he says this. You look at your slate. There's the lodging house on Fulton Street, you say. I know about that. The lodging house is a beginning, he says. I'm talking about what comes after the beginning. He lets that sit. You walk home thinking about it, which is what he probably intended. The view. You have a view on this street. You have it because you know where to get it, which most people don't, or most people can't be bothered, which in this neighbourhood amount to the same thing. The roof. You come up here sometimes on Sunday afternoons, the light afternoons of late autumn before the short days set in entirely, and you come to the northeast corner of the roof where the chimneys are arranged in such a way that they don't block the angle, and you look out. Manhattan. The density of it. All these rooftops pressing together. The jungle of chimneys. Smoke from 1,000 households rising and dispersing into the grey November sky. The water towers that are starting to appear on the bigger buildings, round wooden tanks on stilts, looking slightly precarious against the sky. Clotheslines everywhere, the washing frozen stiff on cold days, the shapes of shirts and sheets like the ghosts of people who used to wear them. And beyond the rooftops, the 2 rivers. You can see both of them from up here, on a clear day. The Hudson to the west, wide and grey-blue. The East River to the east, where the ferry crosses and where, in the distance, the Brooklyn Tower of the bridge stands. The bridge tower. From here it looks smaller than it did close up, which is the paradox of large things. They're most comprehensible from a distance. From here it looks like a fact, like something that was always going to be there and is simply becoming visible. 2 towers, 2 shores, the thing suspended between them that doesn't exist yet. You've heard it will be finished in 10 years, maybe more. The children who will cross it as adults, On opening day are children now. Some of them are probably on this roof with you, metaphorically, somewhere in this city looking at it from their rooftops. The bridge doesn't care about the panic of 1873. It doesn't care about consumption or tenement fires or rent. It's being built slowly by men who descend under the river in iron boxes and come up with the bends, and it will be finished when it's finished, and it will be the longest suspension bridge in the world, and the people who live on Bayard Street will walk across it and pay the toll and think about something else entirely. You think this is probably right, probably accurate the way the city's history feels from here. Things getting built while other things fall apart. The building and the falling happening simultaneously. The whole mess moving in some direction that isn't clear from the ground, but might be, from sufficient height, comprehensible. You're not at sufficient height, but you're trying. The winter comes. It comes the way it always comes here, not as a single event, but as an escalation. The October cold becomes November cold, which is different quality, more committed. The November cold becomes December cold, which is committed and personal. The cold that makes your face hurt when you turn into the wind, and freezes the water in the basin by the next morning, and makes the floorboards under your feet feel like walking on packed earth rather than wood. The coal becomes more important. The calculation of coal, how many days left, how many coins available, becomes the arithmetic of the morning even before the newsboy arithmetic. The street changes in winter. The vendors who depend on outdoor work consolidate, retreat. The commerce of the Lower East Side compresses itself into whatever indoor spaces are available, into shops and tenement stairwells and the warm corners near factories. The newsboy trade gets harder because people hurry more. They don't want to stop and hand over a penny in the cold. They want to get wherever they're going and stop being cold. You learn to position yourself where people have to stop anyway. Doorways, corners where they wait for traffic, and to make the sale in the moment of their pause. You sell fewer papers, you make less money. This is winter. You eat bread more often, soup when you can afford it. The apple cart closes for the season, and you miss it in a specific bodily way, the crunch and sweetness of it. You wear a second pair of socks, wool ones, found at the ragman's for 3 cents, over the cloth wrapping inside the shoes. This creates a circumstance of tightness in the shoes that is uncomfortable but warm, and warm wins. You do not get sick. This is remarkable, and you know it's remarkable, and you do not say it out loud, because saying it out loud seems like exactly the kind of thing that would tip the balance. Stefan Kowalski does not see Christmas. He dies on December 19th, a Wednesday, in the early morning, and you don't know it until you come out of your room at 6 and find Mrs. Kowalska sitting in the hallway outside her door, very still, her hands in her lap, her eyes closed, and she doesn't need to tell you. The city takes notice of deaths the way it takes notice of most things, briefly, functionally moving on. A man from the city comes, forms are filled out. The priest from St. James comes that afternoon. The funeral is on Saturday, a small group, and you go because you were there. At the grave in the cemetery on Long Island, in the specific cold of a December morning, you stand with the Kowalski family and you listen to the words in Polish that you don't understand, and you watch Mrs. Kowalska's face, which is doing something very quiet and very internal that takes a kind of courage you're still learning the name for. On the walk back, you think about your father, your mother, Mrs. Vasari, the line of people who were here and then weren't. You think about the fact that you are still here. That fact has a weight to it that's different from the weight of their absence. Not heavier or lighter exactly. Different. like two things balanced on a scale, the presence and the absence, and the scale moving slightly with each breath you take. January, the new year, 1874. The panic of 1873 is not ending, it's getting worse. The papers you sell every morning are full of it, and the men buying them are often the men the stories are about. Men who had middle-class respectability 6 months ago and are now in the economic territory of decisions you recognise. You can see it in the quality of their coats, the way a coat deteriorates over months without care or replacement. The respectable coat becomes the worn coat, and then the coat that needs repairs, and then the coat with the collar turned to hide the fraying. This is how class movement looks from the street level. Not a dramatic fall, but a coat getting worse. You're not, technically, experiencing the panic of 1873 in the same way these men are experiencing it, because you don't have anything to panic about losing. The panic is affecting your paper sales, and thus your income, but the existential terror of losing status, of going from comfortable to not comfortable, of having further to fall than you thought, that is not available to you. There's something almost clarifying about having nothing. You think about this on the cold walk to Park Row in January, your coat buttoned to the throat, your breath making clouds in the air ahead of you. You have your coat, your shoes, your 40 cents of daily margin, and your ability to go down into a smoke-filled building and get back out. These are the things you actually own. Everything else is the city. Spring comes early to the idea of spring, if not to the actual weather. You can feel it in February before it shows anywhere. A shift in the quality of the light, a slightly different angle to the afternoon sun, a sense in the street of people unclenching slightly, beginning to unpack themselves from the interior where they've been compressed by cold for 4 months. By March, the green things start. The weeds that grow in the gutters and the cracks of walls, the determined organisms that live in this chemical environment and insist on being alive in it. You notice them every year, and every year they seem slightly remarkable. These things growing in the gutter of Bayard Street with everything that the gutter contains. In March, Father Hannigan tells you about a printer's apprenticeship. He tells you matter-of-factly the way he tells you everything, without inflating the significance or minimising the requirements. The Tribune, he says, 3rd floor. They're looking for a boy to work the composition room, learning typesetting. It's a skilled trade, it's indoor work, it's a living. He hands you a card with a name and address on it. I've told them about you, he says. You look at the card. I'm 12, you say. I know. They know. It's an apprenticeship, not a union post. You'd be under supervision for 2 years before they'd consider you for the composition room itself. A pause. What do they pay? 25 cents a day to start. 40 in 6 months if they keep you. Less than a good paper day. More than a bad paper day. Steady. Indoor. A trade. Can I think about it, you say? Until Friday, Father Hannigan says. The position won't wait much longer. You go back to the roof. March now. The cold is leaving in the way the cold always leaves, reluctantly, with reversals, taking its time. But today the air has a softness in it that wasn't there last week, and you can stand on the roof without needing to move to stay warm. You look at the city, the rooftops, the chimneys, the smoke, still, always the smoke, but lighter, greyer, less winter thick, the rivers, both of them, East and Hudson, the light on the water a different quality in March than in January, less metallic, more living. The bridge tower, still there, still being built. No visible progress from here, but you know it's happening. You've heard it's happening. You've learned to trust that the invisible work matters. You came to this building 4 years ago, a 6-year-old boy holding his dead mother's hand, figuratively and literally, a child deposited in Mrs. Vasari's care by a cousin of someone who knew someone, the chain of charity that keeps the Lower East Side alive. You had nothing, literally nothing, a coat and a pair of shoes that fit you, and a letter from your father that you'd already committed to memory. You're 12 now. You have a room. You have a trade, or the beginning of one. You have 49 cents most days, more if you're lucky. You have the recipe for how to stay warm through a New York winter. You have the knowledge of which floorboard not to step on. You have the fact of Stefan Kowalski and the roof and the smoke, which will not leave you, which has become one of the things that structure you from the inside like a bone. You have the girl on Green Street who told you about a delivery job, and the old sailor at the hospital who told you the sea gets in your blood, and Mrs. Kowalska who called you a good boy, and Father Hannigan who put a printer's apprenticeship card in your hand and expected you to figure out what to do with it. You have the bridge, unfinished, on the horizon. You have the city that took your parents and gave you nothing, that charges you 8 cents a day for a room barely bigger than a walk-in closet, that sends the coal smoke into your lungs and the cold into your shoes and the consumption through the walls. The city that is grinding some people down and lifting others, and the difference often comes down to chance and connection, and a coat with its buttons still on. The city that also put 342 people in your building and let them know each other well enough to take up a collection. That gave you a priest who runs a night school. That gave you Jimmy McCaffrey and his instinct for the news cycle, and his knowledge of which corner O'Brien wasn't using this morning. This city that contains, somewhere to the north, a printing room where men set type with their hands and understand words in a physical way. The weight of a letter, the resistance of the composing stick, the way a page of text is built backwards letter by letter until it can be reversed and inked and pressed and given to the world. You can learn that. You look at the card Father Hannigan gave you. You've been holding it this whole time. You'll go on Friday. You'll go before Friday. You'll go tomorrow morning. You put the card in your coat pocket in the pocket where you keep the bread, and you think, the bread is fuel, the card is also fuel, both of them are what you run on. You stand on the roof until the March light starts to thin, until the evening begins to come in from the east over the bridge tower and spread itself across the city's rooftops. You stand there and you let your eyes take in all of it, the whole wide, complicated, unreasonable thing, the bridges and the rivers and the smoke and the rooftops, and you let yourself feel something that is not quite pride and not quite hope, but is somewhere in the region of both. Then you go back downstairs. That night, in the room. The stove is going. You have coal for 5 more days. The room is warm enough that you take off your coat before bed, which in winter you don't always bother. The room smells of coal smoke and the residue of the fire last October, and the particular smell of a small room lived in for a long time, which is not a good smell, but is by now your smell, the smell of the place where you are alive. You light the candle, the shelf, the letter, the book, the tin cup, the comb, everything present, everything where it should be. You take down the book, 2 years before the mast. You've read it all the way through now, twice, and you have the sailor's voice in your head. The careful, precise man who noticed the texture of everything, the ropes and the food and the light on the water. You think about what it means to write a thing down, to make it permanent. The sailor was 22 when he went to sea. A young man from a family with money who chose to work as a common seaman to see what it was like from the inside. He wrote it down when he came back. What he was doing, you think, was making the invisible visible. Making the lives of the people at the bottom visible to the people who didn't know about them. There are people who come to this neighbourhood to do that. Reformers, journalists, the artists and writers who will eventually document the tenements and the newsboys and the garment factories. They'll come with notebooks and cameras, and they'll write books that will shock comfortable people in comfortable houses, and some of those books will result in laws, in building codes, in changes. Those books will have your life in them without having you in them. You'll be in there as a type, a category, a representative of conditions. Not as Thomas Clearary, 12, who sleeps on a pallet on the 5th floor of a building on Bayard Street and reads by candlelight and is going to go to the Tribune office on Friday. But that's all right. The type is real too. The category is real. The conditions are what make the individual, or part of what makes the individual, and writing about the conditions is worth doing even if it misses the particulars. You're not going to write about it. You're going to set the type that other people write with. That's its own kind of thing. You blow out the candle. The dark comes in from the corners, the city outside your window. March at night, 1874. The cart goes by, the ash cart, its regular hour. The man who drives it, whom you've never seen but know by sound, passes without comment. Another cart later, some delivery. The particular rhythm of a heavily loaded vehicle moving carefully on cobblestones. A voice, somewhere below, singing something in Italian. Not sad, not particularly happy, just singing. The river, if you could hear it from here, which you can't, but you know it's there. You know the direction. The East River moving south in the dark, the way it's been moving south since before the city was here. The way it will move south when the city is different, when the bridge is finished, when the buildings you know have been replaced by taller things. The water moves and the city is built and the people in it die and make children who replace them. And those children learn the floorboards and the coal calculations and the morning arithmetic. And it goes on. You're going to go to the Tribune on Friday. You're going to learn to set type. You're going to wake up tomorrow and go to the distribution point and buy your 40 papers and sell them in the cold. You're going to check on Mrs. Kowalska. You're going to eat soup when you have 3 cents and bread when you don't. And you're going to not get sick. You're going to keep not getting sick. You're going to keep moving through the streets with your coat buttoned and your papers under your arm, and your feet finding the cobblestones in the particular dark that is this city's dark. You're going to get to the age where this becomes something you look back on. The scaffolding, the foundation, the work that was done underground. You can't see it from here, but you can trust it. The way you trust the bridge tower, the way the old sailor trusted the open ocean, the way Mrs. Kowalska trusts whatever she says in Polish to the dark when her sons are sleeping. Things you can't see from the ground, but they're happening. The candle is out. The room is dark. The stove makes its small sound, the tick of metal expanding in the warmth. Your hands are still on the blanket, the thin blanket and the less thin blanket layered together, the weight of them familiar. The cold is outside the blankets. The warm is inside. The boundary between them is exactly where it should be. Your feet are warm, both of them. This is tonight the whole measure of things. Outside the Lower East Side continues its night. The saloons on the Bowery are still lit. The night shift workers at the factory on Centre Street are working. The ash cart is 3 blocks away now, 4, fading into the general murmur. From next door, nothing. The Kowalski family sleeping, 4 of them now instead of 6. The apartment changed by absence the way all spaces are changed by absence. From above, nothing. The building sleeping or doing its version of sleep, which is a lighter rest than sleep, more vigilant. From below, nothing more than the building's own sounds, the breath of it, the old wood in the cold, and here, in this room, here, you. Thomas Clearary, 12, soon 13. Orphan, newsboy, reader of borrowed books, future apprentice printer if Friday goes the way it might go. Carrier of a letter so often folded it's going soft at the creases. A letter from a man with red hands and a particular laugh who stood on these streets before you and believed they could hold him, and was right, mostly, for the time he had. You are warm enough, fed enough, alive enough. You have the coat, you have the shoes with the cloth wrapping, you have the card in your pocket and the address on the card, and the city outside the window that is brutal and possible in roughly equal measure. You have tomorrow. Let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took everyone who slept in this building before you, the ones whose names are gone, whose faces nobody remembers, who slept in these same cold rooms under these same stained ceilings, and breathed this same dense air and got up the next morning and tried again. Let the sound of the city fade to background, then further, then to something you're not quite hearing anymore, just present, just the hum of a place that is alive. Let your hands relax, let your feet be warm, let the card in your coat pocket be a card in your coat pocket, and not a whole future, not yet, just a piece of paper with a name on it. Enough for now. Tomorrow the bells from St. James will ring before the sky is ready for them. Tomorrow the ash cart will be 2 streets over, and the cold will be in the floorboards, and the bread will be where you left it, and the coins in your pocket will be waiting to become more coins through the cold mathematics of the street. Tomorrow you'll go to the bridge tower, maybe, if there's time, and look at the men who go underground and come back up and go underground again. Tomorrow you'll go to the Tribune office and stand in front of the door and go in. But that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this room, and this dark and this warmth. Small and hard-won and exactly enough. You close your eyes. The last thing you hear is the singing still. The voice from somewhere below in the building. The Italian voice. A song you don't know the words to, but whose shape you understand. It moves through the walls. It's there when you sleep, and it's there in the morning, or the memory of it is, when the bells come and the cold comes and the new day opens its hands. Good night.